You're standing at the edge of something you can't quite name yet, and it's starting to feel like a pattern. Every time something breaks, relationships, trust, systems, people's faith in themselves, you're the one who knows what to do. Not because you're smarter, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that waiting for rescue is just a slower way to drown. Your hands know things your mouth never says out loud. You can read a person's emotional state like a mechanic reads an engine sound. You sense what people need before they ask, which is convenient because most of them never will ask. And somewhere inside you, there's a quiet satisfaction when you fix something. Not pride exactly, more like proof. Proof that you're reliable, that you matter, that the world is slightly less chaotic because you were paying attention. But here's where it gets interesting and a little bit darker. What happens when you're the fixer is you start internalizing a specific equation. Your value equals your usefulness. And once that equation gets hardwired into your nervous system, it doesn't just stay professional. It bleeds into everything. Your relationships become transactions where you're always the one giving. Your friendships organize themselves around your strength and their weakness, and your own struggles. They become things you solve alone at 3 in the morning with the lights off, because admitting you're struggling would break the entire architecture of who you've convinced yourself you are. There's a psychological concept called learned self-reliance, and it's not what motivates posters claim it is. It doesn't come from confidence. It comes from something much quieter and much more painful. It comes from early experiences where asking for help either went unanswered or made things worse. Maybe a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe a household where vulnerability was treated like weakness. Maybe you just learned very early that if you wanted something done right and you wanted it done at all, you had to do it yourself. And your young brain, incredibly adaptive and trying to survive, built a response pattern around that. You became the fixer because it was safer than being the broken one. Now here's what psychologists like Harriet Lerner and Brené Brown have noticed. People who organize their identity around competence don't actually struggle with asking for help because they're arrogant. They struggle because asking for help requires experiencing something they've spent decades avoiding. It requires standing in the uncomfortable space of not knowing, of being the one who can't, of being visibly needy. And that feeling isn't just inconvenient for someone like you, it's almost allergic. It triggers the exact same nervous system response your younger self learned to escape. There's research from the field of social psychology that reveals something uncomfortable. When fixers imagine asking for help, they consistently catastrophize the response. They imagine judgment, burden, disappointment, but when researchers actually ask other people, "Would you help this person?" the answer is almost always yes. We're far more willing to help than people assume, which means the resistance isn't actually about whether people will help, it's about what asking would mean about you. And here's the really uncomfortable part. Fixers, people whose entire identity is built on solving problems, they often carry a quiet, almost pre-verbal belief that needing help is a burden. That showing up with empty hands is taking something from someone. That vulnerability is a tax on other people's emotional energy. This belief didn't appear randomly, it has a source. Maybe you watched someone you loved exhaust themselves. Maybe you were told in words or through the language of silences and closed doors that you shouldn't need things. Maybe you became the safe person to lean on so young that you forgot leaning was ever supposed to be reciprocal. The psychological impact of this is subtle but devastating. Fixers develop what researchers call a helper complex, a psychological pattern where your sense of self-worth becomes entirely dependent on your ability to solve problems for others. The flip side. You become almost physically uncomfortable receiving care. When someone tries to help you or sit with you in something difficult, you're problem-solving your way out of the conversation before they finish the sentence. Being held feels more uncomfortable than whatever you were carrying. Giving yourself permission to be vulnerable feels like betrayal. And here's the most painful irony. Fixers are almost always extraordinary at helping other people. You show up with literal and emotional tools. You know exactly what someone needs before they know it themselves. You would never, not once, make someone feel like a burden for asking. You'd be genuinely offended if someone suggested you would. And yet you are completely, stubbornly, absolutely convinced that you would. You're certain that if you let someone see you struggling, they'll disappear, they'll resent you. They'll confirm what you've always suspected, that you're only valuable when you're useful. But here's what the research actually shows. The people in your life aren't waiting for you to fall apart so they can leave. Most of them are actually waiting for permission to care about you as a complete person, not just as the stable, capable one. They're waiting for you to trust them enough to let them in. And every time you handle something alone that you could have shared, you're actually sending them a message. You don't belong here, I don't need you, I can't trust you with this. Most of them will read that message and slowly retreat. The psychological cost of this pattern is real and it compounds. Chronic stress from never asking for support. Depression from isolation dressed up as independence. Exhaustion that you justify as responsibility. And a quiet, aching loneliness because no one really knows you. They only know the version of you that's always fine. So what's the actual shift? It's not learning to ask for help as a tactical skill. That's like telling someone with a fear of heights to just relax and look down. The real shift is slower and stranger, and it happens mostly in the privacy of your own mind. It's genuinely updating the story you tell about what asking means, not performing vulnerability, not treating help-seeking like a weakness you're trying to overcome. Actually, fundamentally reconsidering the possibility, which will feel genuinely foreign at first, that needing something doesn't dismantle you. That interdependence is actually how human connection works, that the people in your life aren't only there to receive what you can give, that you're allowed to be held sometimes. Some of the most capable people are actually operating with a quiet, lifelong shortage of being genuinely helped. They've adapted to it so completely that it no longer feels like something missing. It just feels like personality, like that's who they are. Maybe it is, but that doesn't mean it's all you're allowed to be. You can still be the person who fixes things. You're just also allowed to be the person who occasionally hands the wrench to someone else. You're allowed to let someone else be strong for you sometimes, and maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's actually what strength looks like when it's not performing anymore.